I heard my name echoing through the woods, but no one else was there. The sound came from behind me, carried on the cold like breath across glass. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It threaded itself between the trunks, slid under the hush of the forest, and reached me with the familiarity of something that knew exactly where I stood. I stopped walking. My boot hovered over a patch of frost-stiff leaves, then settled without a sound. The forest seemed to lean inward at that, as if listening back. I waited for the echo to finish behaving like an echo, waited for it to thin, to scatter, to die against bark and distance. Didn't. The name hung there, stretched, too intact. A voice preserved by the dark. I told myself it was sound playing tricks. Night did that. Forests did that. Air cooled unevenly. Branches shifted. Valleys cupped noise and returned it warped. I'd read about it. I'd said those things aloud before, confident and smug, during daylight hikes. But I hadn't said my own name. I turned slowly, headlamp slicing a pale cone through the trees. Trunks rose and vanished into black above the beam, their lower halves slick with damp and lichen. The forest floor was a lattice of roots and fallen needles, everything muffled, as if the ground itself were padded. No wind moved. The air pressed close to my skin, sharp and metallic in my nose. Hello! My voice felt obscene in the quiet, a disruption. It traveled only a short distance before the trees swallowed it whole. Nothing answered. I stood there longer than made sense, counting breaths, listening past my own pulse. Somewhere far off, something creaked. Wood on wood, slow and deliberate. A tree settling, or something shifting its weight. I adjusted my pack straps and forced myself forward. The trail was faint here, more suggestion than path, a darker ribbon through darker earth. I followed it because not following it felt worse. As I walked, the forest began to change its posture. That was the only word for it. Branches that had been still started to sway, not with wind but with intention, bending just enough to brush one another. Leaves whispered without breeze. The sound wasn't constant. It came in pulses, like a breath drawn and held. I told myself the cold was tightening everything, that temperature could make wood speak. I told myself many things. My name came again. This time it was closer. I stopped so abruptly my knee twinged. The sound hadn't come from behind. It came from my left, from somewhere downslope where the ground dipped into a shallow ravine. The voice was wrong. Not louder, exactly, but clearer, stripped of distance in a way that made my scalp prickle. It pronounced the syllables carefully, like someone reading from a page they'd practiced. No, I said, and meant it as a statement of fact. The echo, if it was an echo, answered me by saying my name again. Only now it did something echoes shouldn't do. Corrected itself. The first attempt stumbled over the second syllable, clipped it short. The next time it lingered there, stretching the sound until it fit better. I backed away from the ravine, boots scraping softly. The forest seemed to notice. The whispering branches grew louder, overlapping into something like distant applause. My headlamp flickered once, twice, then steadied, its beam suddenly feeling fragile, a small and temporary claim on the dark. I tried to remember exactly how long I'd been walking. Time had gone strange. My watch said barely an hour since dusk, but my body felt older than that, tired in a way that sank into bone. I thought of the car miles back, of the road that had seemed like an afterthought slicing through the trees. I turned to face the direction I'd come from. The trail was gone. Not erased. Not vanished. Just unrecognizable. The ground behind me sloped differently now. Roots knotting into patterns I didn't remember, stones where there had been none. The trees stood closer together, their spacing subtly wrong, like teeth shifted in a mouth. My name drifted through them again, softer, coaxing. It came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing between trunks without losing shape. Each repetition arrived a fraction faster than the last, as if learning how to travel. I started walking without deciding to, moving upslope, then downslope, then nowhere at all. The forest bent sound around me, folded it until my own footsteps came back altered, doubled, arriving a beat too late. Once, I heard myself walking behind me when I was standing still. Cold worked its way through my jacket, needling my spine. The smell of pine gave way to something damp and old, like leaves that had never known sunlight. I felt watched, not in the abstract way people describe, but with specificity. Attention pressed against my back, my neck, my closed eyes when I dared blink. "Stop," I whispered. The name came again, and this time it didn't echo. It spoke directly into the space beside my ear. I spun, heart slamming, headlamp swinging wild arcs through the trees. The beam caught nothing but bark and shadow. Yet the sound had weight, as if breath had disturbed the air. The silence that followed was unnatural, total. Even the branches had gone still. In that silence, I realized something else had changed. The forest no longer sounded deep. No distant night insects, no far-off groan of wind through canopy. It was shallow now, like a set built just beyond the edge of my light. I called my name myself quietly, experimentally. Came back wrong. Not reversed, not delayed, answered. A voice identical to mine responded immediately, overlapping my last syllable, as if it had known when to start. It sounded closer than I was to myself, fuller, more present. Panic rose, sharp and unwelcome. I broke into a run. The ground pitched and twisted, roots grabbing at my boots. Branches reached lower, clawing at my sleeves, my pack. The forest reacted to my movement, closing, guiding, the spaces between trees narrowing just enough to funnel me forward. My breath rasped loud in my ears, the only sound that belonged to me. Ahead, the darkness thinned. A clearing opened like a held breath finally released. Moonlight pooled there, pale and cold, revealing a circle of bare earth surrounded by trees that leaned inward, their branches interlaced overhead. I skidded to a stop at the edge. In the center of the clearing stood a shape that made no sense at first. A figure, human in outline, facing away from me. It was perfectly still. Too still. Moonlight traced its shoulders, its head, the familiar slope of its spine. It wore my jacket. I didn't step closer. Couldn't. My body locked, every instinct screaming that movement would complete something I didn't understand. The figure shifted. Slowly, it turned its head, not all the way, just enough to show the curve of a cheek, the line of a jaw. It didn't have a face yet, just smooth darkness where features should have been, like a reflection waiting for light. When it spoke, it used my voice. "Found you," it said. The sound didn't travel. It didn't echo. It sank straight into the ground, into the trees, into me. The forest answered by whispering my name in 100 small, patient ways, testing it, sharing it. I backed away, step by careful step, eyes locked on the thing in the clearing. It didn't follow. It didn't need to. The trees behind me shifted, branches parting with gentle inevitability, opening a path that led deeper into the dark. As I turned and walked where they directed, my name followed, perfectly paced to my footsteps, spoken by a voice that had finally learned how to sound like it belonged. A creature in the trees kept calling out in my voice. It did it gently at first, as if unsure whether the sound belonged to it yet. My name drifted between the trunks on a thin ribbon of air, carried with the patience of dusk. The forest had just crossed that threshold where light becomes suggestion. The last gray scraps of evening clung to the canopy while the ground below filled with shadow, every root and fallen branch turning into something that could trip or cut or grab. I stopped walking. My pack creaked softly as my shoulders tensed, the sound obscene in the quiet. The cold had arrived early, sliding under my collar, tightening the skin at my neck. When I exhaled, the breath fogged and vanished without sound. I waited for the echo to behave like an echo, waited for it to blur, to scatter, to lose the shape of a voice and become noise. Didn't. The syllables held together too well, preserved as if the trees themselves were passing them hand to hand. "Hello," I said, immediately regretting it. My voice sounded wrong out here. Too flat, too loud. It traveled farther than it should have, then disappeared as if the forest had decided it was finished listening. For a moment there was nothing. No insects, no distant wind. Even the branches above me seemed to freeze mid-creak. Then my voice answered. It came from above, from somewhere high in the canopy where the branches knotted together like ribs. It repeated the word I'd just spoken, not mocking, not loud. Testing. The timing was wrong. Too quick. The sound arrived before the space had time to carry it. I tilted my head back, my neck prickling. Leaves rustled without wind. A dry, careful sound, like fingers sorting through paper. Shadows shifted against the darkening sky, shapes rearranging themselves in small, deliberate ways. I told myself it was an animal. Birds mimicked. Some mammals did too. I told myself this forest had a reputation for strange acoustics, that the slopes and gullies folded sound back on itself. I told myself a lot of things that relied on daylight. The trail beneath my boots narrowed, though I didn't remember it doing that before. What had been a clear path an hour earlier now pinched between trees that leaned subtly inward, their bark pale and cold in the dim. I stepped forward anyway, because stopping felt worse than moving. As I walked, the forest began to react. Every time the voice spoke, my voice, branches creaked in response, as if adjusting their weight to hear better. The sound bent as it traveled, curving around trunks instead of breaking against them. Once, it called from behind me and ahead of me at the same time, overlapping just enough to make my stomach lurch. "Wait," I said without meaning to. The thing in the trees said it too. But it corrected me. It smoothed the rough edge off the word, made it calmer, more reasonable than I'd sounded. Hearing myself improved like that felt like a violation. I stopped again. The cold was deeper now, biting through fabric, settling into my joints. The smell of pine and damp earth thickened, heavy and old. Somewhere far away, wood popped sharply, like a knuckle cracking. It echoed once, twice, then was gone. "Who's there?" I asked and hated how small it sounded. This time, my voice came back carrying something new. Familiarity. It spoke my name the way my mother used to when she wanted me to turn around. Not angry, not afraid, certain. The forest leaned in. The silence between calls grew unnatural, stretched thin and tight. No night insects filled the gaps. No owl broke the tension. It felt staged, as if the woods were holding their breath, waiting for the next line. I tried to retrace my steps. The idea of the trail of direction had already started to unravel. The ground sloped where I didn't remember slopes, roots braided together into patterns that guided my feet whether I wanted them to or not. When I looked back, the way I'd come no longer matched the memory in my head. Trees stood closer together. The dark pooled deeper. My voice called again, closer now. Too close. It came from my left, low and intimate, as if someone were leaning around a trunk just out of sight. I turned slowly, heart hammering, scanning the shadows. The trees there were wrong. Their branches arched downward, not with the weight of leaves but with intention, forming a shallow hollow of darkness beneath them. Something moved up there, not a shape, pressure. Leaves shifted around an absence, bending as if around a body that didn't reflect light. "Don't," I whispered. The thing repeated my name again, and this time the forest helped it. The sound multiplied as it traveled, splitting and rejoining, arriving at my ears from angles that made no sense. The ground seemed to soften underfoot, swallowing the sound of my steps. When I moved, the forest moved with me, subtle adjustments guiding me away from where I wanted to go. I realized then that it wasn't calling to find me. It was calling to place me. I broke into a run. Branches clawed at my sleeves, my pack snagging and tearing fabric. The path curved sharply, then sharply again, folding back on itself until I couldn't tell forward from sideways. My breath roared in my ears, loud enough to almost drown out the voice. Almost. Ahead, the trees thinned. Moonlight spilled into a small clearing, pale and flat, illuminating bare earth untouched by leaves. I skidded to a stop at its edge, chest heaving. In the center of the clearing stood a figure. At first, I thought it was another hiker frozen in surprise. Then the details failed to line up. The posture was right, but too exact. The shoulders sloped the way mine did when I was tired. The pack hanging from its back was my pack, torn in the same places, straps twisted the same way. Faced away from me, the branches overhead creaked softly, settling. The forest felt closer here, the trees leaning in, forming a ring. Sound died at the edge of the clearing, swallowed whole. The figure lifted its head. When it spoke, it didn't need to mimic me anymore. "Come here," it said in my voice, with the confidence of something that had practiced. I took a step back. The ground behind me wasn't there anymore. Just roots, knotted and raised, forming a shallow wall that pressed against my calves. The trees shifted, closing the gap I'd entered through with slow, careful patience. The thing in the clearing turned fully at last. It had my face only where the moon touched it. Where the light didn't reach, there was nothing. No features, no depth, just shadow held in the rough outline of a head. Its mouth moved a fraction too late, as if the sound came first and the shape followed. "Don't be afraid," it said. "I know the way out." The forest answered by whispering my name from every direction, testing it, sharing it, learning how to say it better. As the figure took a step toward me, the trees behind it shifted to make room, opening a path deeper into the dark. And when it smiled, when the shadow tried to remember how, I understood what the calling had been for. It wasn't trying to lure me closer. It was practicing how to replace me.